Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Erik Brooks of South Milwaukee is a Democrat running in the 21st Assembly District. The election is November 3. Erik, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking.
Look, you're a mayor. Let's talk about property taxes, okay?
My favorite topic.
Your favorite topic. Well, we're going to get to a lot of topics, but let's start with that. Local governments, schools and local governments, been living with caps and limits on property taxes for more than 20 years. So you're elected to the Assembly, you're voting on the next state budget. Do we keep those caps and limits in place?
To me, I want the answer to that is no. I'd like to work towards that. I'm also realistic. I'm running this candidacy as being a champion for cities and schools. I live this every day as mayor. I've been now in my third term as mayor in the city of South Milwaukee. I have 2 kids in our South Milwaukee School District. I want to be a champion for them. And a lot of times that means getting the state the heck out of the way. And especially when it comes to revenue. Now, cities, and I'll speak to cities, have been hamstrung by these caps, by levy limits, by other limitations for a long time, to your point. I think there has to be a bigger discussion here long-term about the funding of governments, local governments specifically. So I think we need to get there. But I think there are reasonable changes that can be made to allow for flexibility on levy limits, specifically for schools. I think there's an inequitable funding formula that's really created some winners and losers, with South Milwaukee, honestly, as a loser in some ways in that school district funding. So there are some changes that can be made short of radical change. But yeah, I think we need to have that conversation about a bigger fix for local government funding. But I'll lastly say this about cities. Levy limits have hamstrung us for a long time, especially in cities like South Milwaukee, zero growth communities. We're really, all we can increase our levy is by the net new construction number. Well, in a fully developed city like South Milwaukee, in a given year, that's maybe 0.1%, 0.2. I think this year it's 0.1. That's about $20,000 or less in a $19 million budget. So that is difficult to keep up with basic inflation. That's just a math equation. So how do we fund our government, fund the vital services people come to expect? Police, fire, public health, garbage pickup, all of that. How do we continue to fund that in an environment like that? It's difficult, and it's an issue that is red, blue, urban, rural, cities big and small across the state. Hundreds are like us. We need to fix that.
Well, okay, let's stay on that subject. So when you talk about local governments like the one that you're mayor of, needing new sources of revenue, I'm reminded that Representative Goyke in Milwaukee has got a bill. You pass a referendum, you could levy an additional half-cent sales tax. So is that the type of new revenue option that cities like you're a big part of need?
We need options, and I think there's a lot of potential options. And certainly sales tax is one of them. More flexibility and levy limits alone would be helpful. There's a lot of options that could be looked at. I was a supporter of the fair deal, and still am, that the county brought forward as allowing for a county-wide sales tax, which voters, I would say, approved actually by a non-binding referendum some years ago. But we need to look at options like this. I mean, I see what's happening in Grant Park, for instance, in Milwaukee County, in South Milwaukee, an iconic treasure in South Milwaukee, and the lack of funding is happening in that park and across our parks is a tragedy right now. And honestly, until there's new revenue options, that's going to be hard to see much light at the end of the tunnel there. And that's where the state can play a role. So I think there's a lot of options that need to be looked at here. Local option sales taxes, county option sales taxes, whatever. I mentioned again, the revenue, the levy limit flexibility, whatever that is. We need to have that conversation, because it's you see it every day with just the impossibility, or almost impossibility, to keep up with what we've had here for over a decade in cities across the state.
Well, a few questions on the pandemic. The governor's statewide mask edict is scheduled to expire September 28. Do you think it should be extended as an issue of public safety?
I do. I support it. I know enforceability is a big issue for communities and everyone else, but I do support it. I think it's the right thing to do from a public health perspective. We need to act from a public health perspective. Public health has to come first and foremost here, and masks are effective. I think it's why we're seeing some of the numbers we are, that, in some ways data is improving here locally across the state, et cetera. That's because of the measures we're taking. I think it's because of, and it's been shown, because of the mask mandates. So yes, I think they're effective. They work. I'd like to see it extended. I think people, but mandate or not, people should just choose to wear a mask. I think it's the right thing to do. And it's reflective of this pandemic we're in, where this is a major health crisis right now. And it's not, the global numbers are not good across the US, et cetera. And we need to do all we can to keep that curve flat until there's a true vaccine. We need to do all we can. And that relates directly to reopening schools, businesses, et cetera. We're not going to get back to what we consider normal until we do these things and continue to do these things and act smartly.
Okay. You know all about budgets. Let me ask you about the state budget. If the pandemic cuts state tax collections by, okay, I'm going to make up a figure, $1 billion. You're in the legislature. Your options, raise taxes and fees or cut spending. Where do you come down on that?
To me, I think everything has to be on the table. I think this is going to be the most difficult biennial budget in a long, long time, maybe ever. There might be a budget repair bill coming. I get that. I'd be walking into a legislative seat here with that in mind, and knowing there's some but there will be hard choices to make. I get it. There's going to be pain that has to be spread around. I promise this. I will work to, again, be that champion for cities and schools and preserve those vital services, those core services of local governments. The government services you see every day, right? You don't see state government in action as a taxpayer, maybe that often. I guarantee you see police, you see fire, you see your library, you see your public health, you see your garbage get picked up every week. We need to do what we can to make sure local governments have what they need to deliver their services. Now, I get there's going to be a lot of options on the table, shared revenue cuts probably, other changes that could impact other reductions in other state aid, things that will impact local governments. I will fight very hard to limit those or preserve those. To help preserve those services. But I'll lastly say this, if and when some of those cuts come, then give us more flexibility. Give us the ability to help ourselves. If you're not going to help us, state government, let us help ourselves. That will be kind of my mindset going in here is, then we get back to the discussion about funding of government. Is there other ways we can raise revenue if you're going to take revenue away from us? I mean, those are conversations that need to be had, and maybe this is the right time to have them, or at least start having them at the level they need to be had.
Hospitals across the nation, Wisconsin, of course, treating COVID-19 patients. So you're in the legislature voting on the next state budget. Do hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they may have gotten in the current budget?
I think healthcare providers, anyone involved with public health, so I'd kind of widen that question a bit out and say, right now, in dealing with this pandemic, and this is not going away likely anytime soon, and then you get ready for the next one, right? So you look at what we learned here, and what needs to happen with our medical infrastructure, things like that. We need to look at our medical infrastructure, all of our healthcare infrastructure, and make investments accordingly. That includes hospitals, but not just hospitals. I look at local public health. I look at other healthcare providers. So yeah, I would make that a priority for sure.
Senator Chris Kapping just dropped a bill last week. It says this: if your business or organization complies with COVID guidelines, protocols to protect your patients, employers, or customers, you couldn't be sued over a COVID incident. Do we need that law?
I think everyone should be protected from frivolous lawsuits. The word frivolous, I think, is a big one there, right? And that all depends on the definition of frivolous. So I want to learn more about the bill, get educated on the bill, to make a final determination there, right? I think you certainly want to do what you can to protect those who are taking the steps necessary, the smart steps that they need to take to address COVID. But I'd be hesitant to comment 100% on that specific bill, other than to say I think we should not look to punish or allow to be punished those who have stepped up and try to do this the right way.
States around Wisconsin are legalizing recreational and medical marijuana. What's your position, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, and I probably disagree with Democrats on this to some degree. A lot of my future Democratic colleagues, and I honestly proudly do that in some areas. I'm a moderate here in the 21st district, and as a mayor, and will pledge to be in Madison. And so, yeah, I would be okay with medical. I would be against recreational legalization. I have concerns about marijuana. Look, I'm the parent of a sophomore in high school and a seventh grader. To me, I don't want anything that makes it easier for them to have access to marijuana. And I also say this from a public health perspective. I have my public health leaders locally, police chiefs, et cetera, that and abusers. I've been a part of our public health efforts around abuse education, et cetera, and heard stories about this as a gateway drug. I worry about marijuana being that. It starts with marijuana, then what happens next? So I'd be really hesitant and would likely not support full legalization of marijuana.
Mayors across Wisconsin like you are followed that Kenosha incident pretty closely.
Absolutely.
The issue is policing reform. Governor's got 9 bills. Senator Juan Garter Racine's got his own bills. The Professional Police Association have their bills. Black Caucus has a bill. The speaker's forming a caucus. So a task force, excuse me. Speaker's forming a task force. My question is, what, if any, policing reforms are you convinced need to be enacted?
Well, I think we need to look at a lot of them, and we need to have the conversation. This is where Madison's not working right now. They literally are not working. It's been the legislature 140 days plus of not meeting. By the time this is all said and done, I suspect it'll be 7 to 8 months without having met and discussed significant legislation. I think it's a conversation we need to have. I know there's all kinds of competing ideas out there and bills and proposals. I'd be in favor of some of it, not with others, but I'd want to learn more about each specific recommendation. I think there are ways Madison can help, but I also want to make sure that, while recognizing change must come, and I think that's partly policing reform. There's a lot of areas to talk about here when it comes to what's happened in Kenosha and with the George Floyd tragedy, et cetera, and just race relations in general. I think police reforms are part of it, but I want to make sure they're smartly done. And I think respecting the fact, and I believe this, that I do stand with police. The vast majority of police are good people. And to me, you hold the bad ones accountable, like any profession. You hold criminals accountable. And that will be where I stand on this. So I think, that said, I think police would agree there are changes to come. There are potentially improvements to make in how they do their job. I get a little concerned when Madison starts to dictate tactics and thinks they maybe know how to do the job better than police or any profession, right? So when I see some of these really specific tactical pieces of legislation, I get a bit concerned. That said, I think there are opportunities. I look at one example, to me, body cameras. South Milwaukee was an early adopter of these about a decade ago. I've been surprised to find out over the last few months, especially, that there are large departments that still don't have these. That could be an area for lawmakers to get involved, and maybe if it's a requirement or not, maybe through funding support, et cetera. But there are ways that would, while it doesn't help in some regards, it could in others, around accountability for police and just, I think that's important, that kind of legislation. But again, I get worried about tactics. But I think there's a conversation to be had among policing, among race, about all of these issues. We're having it at the local level in South Milwaukee. The state can enable that. I think that's important, but I think it is a local conversation. And because it varies by community, but we need to have that conversation, and the state needs to be an ally, and the legislature needs to be an ally in having it. But first, it starts with actually convening. And in Madison, to convene the Senate, convene the Assembly. Let's discuss this. Don't just gavel in, gavel out. We deserve better. There's a better way right now. And when you have these huge issues that need to be discussed, not getting discussed, it's a problem. And that's where change comes in Madison.
You're a Democrat. Governor Evers has proposed the People's Maps Commission to draw the next set of congressional legislative lines. But the Constitution says the party in control of the Capitol does that. Do you support the governor?
I do, or I support proposals similar to that. There's a better way. When I talk about there being a better way in Madison, this is one big example. I get it. Our current system is to the victor go the spoils. That's just wrong. And to me, that has to change. There's a better way to do maps. And I think Republicans need to understand that. Democrats do. I fear that if Democrats were in power, similar to Republicans, we'd be having the same conversation the other way. I think both parties need to understand there's a better way, and we have to find that better way. And that better way is not a scenario where you've got over half of all assembly votes in the state in 2018, where for Democrats, it's a 60 plus seat majority for Republicans in the assembly. I mean, that's not a better way. We need more competitive districts and more free exchange of ideas that come with that. This predestined and predetermined election results are not good for anybody. I think it hurts. It kind of in some ways has led to what we're seeing now, this complete gridlock in Madison and the inability for both parties really to come out of their entrenched corners and really try to work together in a cooperative fashion in the middle of the road to get stuff done. I want to be part of that solution. I think fair maps would help deliver that.
Last year, Governor Evers recommended raising the gas tax to provide a stable source of funding for highways and bridges. It's 30.9 cents a gallon, hasn't been raised in, I think, 10 years. Could you vote to raise the gas tax?
I think it all has to be on the table. I'm not sure of that size of an increase. We need a long-term transportation funding solution here. We've been kicking this down the road for a long time, and that's both Democrat and Republican governors and legislatures. Certainly the current Republican legislature has not helped. So yeah, we need a solution there. Is gas tax part of it? Potentially. Fees, part of it, sure. I consider things like toll roads. There's a lot of ways to do this, and we need to figure it out because it's not working right now, and we can't keep, I think borrowing's part of it too. So all of this has to factor in. We need a long-term strategy that's really viable to deliver the investment we need in our infrastructure, not just roads. I'm talking mass transit, multimodal transportation, all of that. I'm a big champion. I want to be a big champion in Madison for all of that. It can't just be about roads, but right now it can't be about much of anything because there's really not a real solution on the table. We need to have that conversation in a bipartisan way.
As a veteran mayor, I'm really curious about your answer to this question. Should schools and local governments that plan major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? There was a study that said in 2015, out-of-state companies got contracts, $72 million, and that more than doubled to by 2018 to $146 million. What's your position on preferences?
I get concerned when you use words like "have to," as a local leader, right? And this is where I certainly prefer I'd like to find an avenue that allows maybe through an incentivized model, more the carrot, less the stick model of incentivizing local work. I mean, we're doing it in South Milwaukee. We have $1.5 million streetscaping project wrapping up now in Milwaukee Avenue. We have a local contractor that's got a large award that's just done a terrific job and working on that project. I'm so glad they came in at the bid they did, and they're doing great quality work. So I'd love that. I'd love to see more of that. Do I want the state to require us to do that? I don't think I do. Again, I'm running as a champion for cities and schools, and part of that championship mentality to me means more opportunities to make local decisions and less Madison control of local government, less of this idea of we know better. We've had that. Madison does not know better in a lot of ways, and I will bring that mentality to Madison. So yes, I think the answer is I'd like to explore ways to do that, but the requirement idea is probably a no-go for me, for sure.
Final question, differences between you and the incumbent you're trying to unseat on November 3?
Yep, and I think it comes back to what I say to every voter I talk to is there's a better way. We need to work more together. I think we do it every day as local leaders. And the biggest difference is I've done this, right? So I'm in my third term as mayor. I've been in elected office here in the local government for over 10 years. We local leaders every day work together to solve problems. That is not happening right now in Madison. We need to do better. That's why I'm running for this seat. My frustration grew so much. I'm going to try and be a small part of the change and try and bring some of that thinking that we do every day at the local level to Madison. So that's been my biggest difference here is that we've got to find ways in a bipartisan way to get stuff done. And that means going against your party. I think a huge difference for me and Representative Rodriguez is I'm pretty sure she's 100% vote for her party. I will not be that in Madison. Put that down. Hold me accountable to that. And my Democratic colleagues know that. As a mayor, I think I have to be there. Where there are good ideas all over the place, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, independent, you name it. I think there are good ideas all over the place. We should embrace those. Will I align with Democrats? Sure, I'm running as a Democrat proudly, so yes. but we don't need 100% votes right now for parties. We need good ideas supported in a bipartisan way to get stuff done. Madison's not working right now. I want to be a part of the solution to change that.
Erik Brooks of South Milwaukee is a Democratic candidate in the 21st Assembly District. The election is November 3. Erik, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.